Hello, it's the Anfield Wrap. It's John Gibbons hosting this week, and I'm joined by Mo Stewart, by Jake Nolan, and by Fuad Hassan. And we're going to talk a little bit about our rivals and who are our rivals and who we should be looking out for this season, as we have a little bit more information on who's going to be stronger than others this season. But first of all, I just wanted to say for the 23-24 season, the Anfield Wrap is sponsored by Green King Sports, where football is more than a game. Green King Sports venues are showing every televised Liverpool fixture over the course of the season, so swerve the dodgy streams and get your mates together and get down to your local Green King pub and get closer to the action. Also, Green King Sports have just very recently, launched the Green King Sports Instagram page, which will be home to fan content, deals and competitions throughout the season. So drop them a follow and you'll get all that, including me giving some Premier League predictions, some of which looks absolutely wild already. I'll be honest with you. So, yeah, if you want to laugh at me and a few other people who you recognise from Coach Home and stuff like that, yeah, do get on there. Also, I'll be completely honest, you're helping the Anfield Wrap out if you follow them. So yeah, Green King Sports, if you want to follow them on Instagram, we would appreciate it. Jake, will you follow Green King Sport on Instagram, please?
Yeah, I'll follow them right away, John. When I can come off aeroplane mode.
Do it in singles.
I've got 2 accounts and they're both already followed.
No. Right. Fuad, what's your...
I definitely already followed them, John.
So there we are. Like Mike Atherton, just doing it in singles. We'll get it up there. He'll be thousands before you know it. Anyway, I thought it'd be good to have a bit of a chat, gents, about who we think our rivals are this season, who we should be worried about, and who you already have your eye on. Basically, who are very much our business and who are none. So are we in a fight for top 4? In which case, are we looking at Manchester United, Newcastle, Spurs, Chelsea, or even West Ham? Left off Brighton, they're going to get told off in the room. A lot of heat for Brighton. Are we looking to be the nearest challengers to Man City, in which case are we looking at Arsenal? Or are we being bold and looking at City themselves? Or are you going to tell me, listen, John, all I can concentrate on is Liverpool, and if Everton are going down, why on earth are you talking to me about Brighton? Jake, who's your business and who isn't?
It is Brighton.
I have no Brighton notes.
No, I've said before, I think my second favourite team in the world is Brighton. But no, I think what's been good about coming back to having a bit of a break from the football, last summer obviously we didn't have much of a break. We had the World Cup and it felt very much, felt very much sort of bloated and fed up with it all. But I feel like the football's come back. There's a lot to be excited about. There's a bit of change. I watched a lot of Celtic over the last couple of years, so I'm excited with the big Ange-ness of Spurs as well. Made up like Harry Kane's fucked off because it just invites a new narrative, doesn't it? That isn't all about Harry Kane and don't want to see him in his Skechers boots. So that's good. But yeah, I'm loving Brighton. I'm hating seeing James Milner look bossing and inverted fullback, albeit
looks nice in blue and white as well.
He does. Yeah. I'm weirdly always Team Moisey as well. I don't know why. I think it's because the Evertonians didn't like him even when he was good for them, and I just think he's reinvented himself loads of times by just getting good players and good lads and big lads, and I've enjoyed watching West Ham.
They didn't like Moyes because he couldn't win at the big clubs, and I'm like, that's the fucking least of your money. Yeah, so imagine that being the biggest problem.
Exactly, so I'm enjoying that. I think Burnley's Vincent Kompany as well. I'm enjoying watching them.
Nice suits.
Yeah.
It's interesting he's gone for the suits. I thought it'd be more of a tracksuit.
And baseball cap as well, which is interesting.
Me too, yeah. Put himself in the shot window already, isn't he? we all know what he's doing.
Just the part, be the part.
Yeah, exactly. Well, But yeah, no, I think there's loads to be excited about, loads of teams to look forward to, and I won't take up all the teams, so some of the lads can talk about some of the other teams.
I know, I'll go to Mo, but you can repeat or change depending on what I mean, for you, when it comes to being sick of sport, you are the adage of a change is as good as a rest. You just rotate them.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you asked me who am I watching, the answer is I'm watching everybody. Like, that's just a given. But in terms of who I think is Liverpool's business, it's interesting because you can kind of get caught up with this part of the season because we've had 4 games. Everyone's kind of played at home and away. Everyone's kind of played at least one big game. So you think you can start to make some conclusions, but there's still a long way to go.
Yeah.
And I think at this stage of the season, we can't really rule out anyone, however comedic they look at Chelsea. Then the point is that over the course of the season, you will start to catch up with everyone. You can see who's good teams, but you need a good squad to get into the top 4 and into the top 6. So I reckon there's about half the league who are believing that they should be fighting for Europe. Like in their dressing rooms, in their boardrooms, in their rooms or versions like this, they're all talking about Europe. And that's like 10, and there's 7 places? So I'm watching all of those other 9 right now. In 2 months' time, I maybe will stop watching some of them a little bit more.
It's a lot of work, Phil. It's a lot of work. It's what I would say. I was hoping we were going to whittle them down, but in our boardroom tomorrow, I'm going to be saying, listen, we might have to split up and make notes, present to each other each morning. This is what Brighton are up to. Yeah, James Nolan's still looking great. Who are your business, or have you Mo got in your head and it's fucking everyone?
Mo has got my head of it. We've got
to worry about the bottom 6 for reasons
and we do as well. Yeah, these are about 4 teams then. We just sort of ignore.
Our business will be a quick one.
No, I see where Mo's coming from. I think that belief is definitely there, and the way the season started definitely feels like that. I feel like I say this a lot at the beginning of a new season. The idea of it looks different. That there seems to be the quality of the league's gone up. That teams are playing more expansively. But this time it really does feel like that. Where when you look at a lot of the games and how a lot of the sides set up, it looks like not only are teams choosing their moments, they're believing that they have to go periods of a game where they do need to sort of choose an area of that match. It doesn't matter who they're against, especially if they're against a big side actually, and they have to really, really go for it. And I think that's going to make things quite interesting. I think there's going to be a few more unexpected results than normal, but on the whole, I think the traditional top 6, if you like, are the traditional top 6. I think Chelsea are the ones that sort of outlie from that at the moment. But I do have my eye on City and Arsenal, especially. I think you just have to go off last season in terms of who the 2 teams were and how they were, miles apart from everyone else really for most of the season. So I am measuring up against them too. I do feel though Liverpool are better than Arsenal. I don't know what it is. I don't know exactly what's making me think that, but I just feel like if we were to play Arsenal early on in this season, I'd back us quite comfortably, which might be a bit mad, but it's always going to be City, isn't it? I'm always going to think, let's go after the league. I think that's then how you whittle down to top 4. It's hard now to sort of imagine going into a season going for top 4 at the start. I feel like if you go in with that sort of hope for the league and that expectation as well to an extent, it then helps you sort of you can then sort of come down as the season goes. Coming up is also fun as well, but I think coming down is a bit more what I'm into right now.
Fuad mentions there that we came up against them. You'd fancy Liverpool, and it is an interesting how the fixtures fall and how much it impacts on your start and optimism, and whether there's a good time to play people or whether it does sort of even itself out. I've shared something this morning with everyone, and it is from Opta Analysis, and I'm going to sort of refer to it throughout the show today, and I'll tweet it out. But basically, if you go to Opta Analysis, it's just theanalysis.com, and there's an article from the start of the season, which is how hard is every Premier League team's start of the season, and it basically analyses, I think based on where they finished last year, although it's Opta, they probably go into a little bit more than that, but we'll presume it's largely based on recent league performances and recent league standings, who had the hardest fixtures and who had the opening ones, and the easiest ones. It does the first 5, and then it goes into the first 10, which is quite interesting in itself to see how things might change over the next coming fixtures. As I say, I'll refer to it as we go, but as a bit of a guide, and this is first 5, and obviously we've only played 4, and in fact Burnley and Luton have only played 2, but as a guide, Chelsea have had the easiest start, which is really, really funny. Spurs second easiest, Manchester City third easiest. It looked easy. I'm sort of I'm a bit only third, but they did play Newcastle, he did well last season, and Arsenal fourth, and then West Ham fifth. So of those 5 teams have had the easiest starts. 4 of them have made really good starts, and so I guess if you look at that, Newcastle is the toughest, by the way, and I think that needs bearing in mind when we consider that they're only on 3 points. United is 4th toughest, and they're on 6. Both teams that we will talk about at some point, I'm sure. But moving aside from Chelsea, laughing at Chelsea for a minute, I guess when you look at Spurs, City, Arsenal, West Ham, they're good outliers of why they had good starts. But to focus on Tottenham Hotspur, your interest at the moment, and Big Ange, it's not the worst thing in the world. What's interesting is, Jake, when you flip from first 5, so the second easiest, Spurs from the first 10 have the easiest fixtures, according to Opta. And they've never seen me wrong before, Jake. And so, you might say, well, you play everyone twice, but if everyone's feeling good and there's the Big Ange factor and everyone's flying and it's Harry who, These things do matter, don't they?
I think so, yeah. I mean, I would like to sit down, Mr. Opter, and go like, listen, lad, how are you doing this? Because I feel like I need to know a little bit more devil in the detail and all that. Like, I understand how it works. But it does...
There's probably small print, Jake, but I haven't got time for it. I'm not that kind of guy.
Me neither. I don't read past 2 sentences. I haven't got the mental attention. But
it's up to power rankings to judging it by, but then fucking Neil probably comes up with them.
Yeah. Is that where he's been?
Locked in a bunker.
Yeah, that's how he takes his time off, his annual leave at the Anfield Wrap.
Bunker in Vegas.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, Neil wrote the agenda for this show. Honestly, I texted him on Saturday night going like, I'm struggling here because I've been hosting most of the shows because he's been away, and obviously Harriet's situation as well, and so I've been like, you know, any ideas, and he sent me a full fucking agenda. I was like,
just a big graph.
It's right, lad. Made up. Have a nice holiday.
Yeah. Even scripts for the rest of us.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about those scripts, by the way.
You never had Brighton either, dickhead. Go on.
Fair play. Well, listen, yeah, back to Tottenham, I suppose, is I just think, you know, not to kind of like this Neil's agenda here, but I'm a little bit more touchy-feely when it comes to football, more than stats and numbers and things like that, and I do feel
no, he didn't do this off the rankings thing, by the way. He just said talk about rivals.
Okay, it's your fault then. No, only messing. But I think what he did at Celtic, and I kept my eye on that, was coming from a Roman Catholic household. It was automatically bring a feel good factor back and made it very much in a sort of Klopp-esque manner, and he plays good football and goes about things the right way, and he's great in interviews. And I was a bit surprised when he went to Tottenham, to be honest, because I thought that he might have wanted a club that was a little bit more, that identity than sort of the poison chalice of Spurs, really. But I've been impressed with how he's just gone in and sorted things out. They needed a centre half. He just brought Mickey Longlegs in. He looks great.
Quick, isn't he?
Yeah, very quick. I would have loved him for us, big lad as well. Get behind that. And I think he's handled the Kane situation brilliantly. I think there's so many other managers that they would have had that just would have folded like a deck of cards if that had happened. And I think the fact that he's put more responsibility on Son changed the way that they played slightly, and just made Spurs fan enjoy going the game again. I think, which is a big thing. We had it, didn't we? Where it was dull before Jurgen coming in straight away, start saying the right things. You start seeing the team doing what you want to see, and football fans aren't that hard to please. We just want to see our lads work hard and score all the goals.
Yeah, I had Flav on the Friday show on Friday, and he was like, everything's telling me to temper expectations, but I can't be asked. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I'm like, boss, I love all that. Do you know what I mean? Because that's the point of being a football fan, and follow him on Twitter. And he's like, oh, we can't do it, but maybe we can. Stuff like that. And that's how. And you can't run a football team on good vibes sort of forever, but if you've got 20 points after 10 games and good vibes, then you're in about you can tell yourself a story. You continue to tell yourself the story, and this way the easy start and no Europe helps.
Definitely, and I think it does matter from team to team and from kind of situation to situation. But the way Spurs are, like you say, they kind of needed more than just a tactical refresh. They just needed an emotional refresh, and like you say, to enjoy it. So a good start, an easy start before they get into the big games, because obviously they've got Arsenal coming up, and say what you like about all the optimism. If they get pumped by Arsenal 3-0, then it's going to make it all different. So you want to have as much ammunition going into that game as possible with your hands. So you want to have feel like you've got as much control over your situation. But results are key. Results are the thing that help you build those narratives. It gives you the time and space to be able to say to your players, look, this is what's happening. This is where we're going. And to kind of wind it back a little bit to Chelsea, I think it's really fascinating, the fact that they've had an easy start and they've done badly. And I think that, again, shows you the psyche of that group. I think their best performance was against us, right? And when you're playing against a really good team, you have to be on the same page. You have to be keyed in, locked into the game plan. You have to give your best of yourself. Those kind of players, they're not really sure of the situation. It's all a bit mad at Chelsea, isn't it?
Yeah.
But they're playing Luton. We should be able to beat Luton. They're playing, playing Nottingham Forest. We should be able to beat them. So they're not going to be as keen. You're going to get more selfish play. You're going to get more disorganised play, and that's what we've seen. I think if Chelsea had the start of Newcastle, they'd have got more points than Newcastle did.
Yeah, well, perhaps maybe that is the case. The Kane thing is interesting because they haven't sort of directly replaced him, and Ange talked about getting more goals from different places and stuff like that, and it's working right now, but The one negative I would say is that it doesn't look to me like Richarlison stepped up in the way that they would have liked Fuad, and they haven't bought a number 9, and obviously Son's still there and can do a bit central, but I'm sure he'd rather have a focal point.
Yeah.
Son gets a hat-trick against Burnley, and listen, he's still a really, good player, and he's a good finisher. But I don't think he wants to do loads of number 9. And they tried a bit of Solomon sort of last time out in terms of dovetailing and things like that. He looks like a decent enough player, but I don't know. I just wondered at some point, do they go back into the market in January? Is that the thing? Because I think if it is going to sort of work long term, I think they need more from Richarlison, or they probably need to think about the fact that, even if you can't directly replace Kane, then someone who can do a bit of what he does might be needed.
Yeah, definitely. You did talk quite a lot, didn't he, about scoring from other areas of the pitch, set pieces, all these different things that I think is always a good sign when a manager comes in. Something we saw with Jurgen quite early on as well. I think, it is interesting, the forward line. I think that's where I struggle to see them really finishing that high up further down the season. I think that, like Mo said at the start, that's where the squad comes into it, and I just don't feel like they've got a bit of depth there, but it's a lot of unknowns.
They've let quite a few go on the slide as well, in terms of not just Kane, but on loan and stuff like that. Like Reguilon going to United on loan and stuff like that. Harry Winks, who has gone, who isn't the best player in the world, but was all right for 10, 15 games this season. And
Sanchez
stuff like that
as well.
Nelson Sanchez. He was on the bench last game, and so his part of squad's going.
Yeah, and well, he brings back Lo Celso, doesn't he? Which is interesting, and I think there's also Ndombele who's hanging about, or has he come back for now?
No, I think he's gone as well.
Has he gone as well? Yeah. It is interesting because it doesn't feel like there's a natural Maddison replacement if he's out for any period of time in terms of playing in that role as such, or doing the things he can do. And look, that's something that I think he's one of those players you just sort of have to ride with, because he will have spells where he will be breathtaking and have streaks of games where he's going to be getting goals and assists. But I do feel he is one where and just natural in that position, it does dry up, it does go away for a little while, and whether they can replace that, whether there's enough sort of in that team and around it, I'm not so sure. I think there's a lot of unknowns with those attackers. Son's the only one really who you can hang your hat on and be like, he is going to get you this amount of goals per season, and that's fine for the position Spurs are in. That they should be figuring these things out. I think Kulusevski has a lot of potential. I think Solomon also is a bit of an unknown, but I wouldn't rule out him getting the best out of Richarlison. I wouldn't rule it out just because I feel like there has been that big change there, hasn't it? The vibe has completely shifted, and you can't downplay that considering what they had before. They had 2 managers before who seemed quite miserable, if we're all being honest, and that probably translated to the players as well. So I'm hesitant to put too much on them in terms of finishing top 4, but I think they'll have fun.
Yeah, he's a moments guy, Richarlison, isn't he? Like, you saw the way he reacted when he scored that goal against us. Yeah. Like, if that had meant something, I think we'd have seen a different player by now. I mean, I'm very glad it didn't. Obviously.
I'm really pleased you brought it up now, to be honest with you, because I temporarily forgot about it.
There we go. But, say he scores a winner against Arsenal, then that would do the same thing for him. But I do think that there are other ones that Spurs have got on their horizon. Like, they were talking about Gift Orban out as well, but I think to bring him in at the end this summer probably would have been a mistake. You don't want to give everyone else, like you say, a chance to breathe, a chance to kind of get out from under the shadow of Kane, see where they are.
Brennan Johnson comes in as well, right?
He does, yeah. So, although, I mean, I'm still to be convinced by his actual goal output, genuinely. But, Spurs are going to be a team that's always going to be worth watching. But I don't think they will actually yet, by the end of the season, going to grow into a team where you can predict how they're going to play. I still think they're going to be up and down.
See, Spurs are a funny one for me because they've actually finished above us in the table more often than you think. You think, Spurs are just Spurs. Where it was actually, certainly before Jurgen Klopp, or even in the early days of Jurgen Klopp, if you looked at a sort of a 7 or 8 year period, like more often than not, they finished above us. But I do still think, if in March we're saying Spurs are our business, and then you say to me, does that mean Spurs have had a good season or Liverpool have had a shit one? Have a go for the latter. And apologies to Spurs, but that's just where I am. But if Arsenal are our business in February and March, then that suggests to me maybe we'll be doing a little bit stronger. Is that your feeling? I think they're an interesting one to me, Arsenal. They've got 10 points, but then they do drop points in that Fulham game, which you feel like they would have won that sort of last season. The transfers are interesting as well. Jake, to start with you again, because Declan Rice is the headline one because he's all the money and he's got a big goal already, and listen, we know he's a good player. He seemed like a sure thing in terms of not necessarily is he going to be worth all that money, but you knew he'd do well there, and that's what you pay a premium for, greater knowledge and greater certainty. But of the other ones, the fact that Timber's out for the season already is a massive blow for them. They worked so hard to get him. All the clubs were involved and they convinced them to go there, and then you just lose him straight away. And Kai Havertz, I'm just not having. And so, I don't know. I think there's maybe still question marks, about them. And yeah, I think whether are they our business or not, I think we've got to respect where they finished last season, and again, sort of, how they started. They are on 10 points, but I feel like if we're doing everything we should do and can do, I still think we'll finish above them. But where are you with Arsenal?
Yeah, I think us, them and City are the three best teams in the country, and I think ultimately City are out on their own a little bit, and it's down to us to kind of chase them. I feel like if we'd kind of gone one-on-one with them now, and we're playing them now, I'd be confident in Liverpool, but I do think it'd be a 50-50 game. One thing I will say about them, lovely strips that they've got this season. Been impressed with whoever's doing the creative. But I think the one thing that I don't really get about them at the moment is they've been on this trajectory for the past sort of 2-3 years of playing a certain way, and Arteta kind of building up to make them believe and make them a way of playing. And I think it's with the similarities to what we're doing and what they're doing is I think we're both doing mad things systematically and positionally a little bit, and maybe that's because you're worried about other teams working us out. But one thing that was labelled at Guardiola quite a bit is he could be too much of a smart ass for his own good at times, and I don't know whether Arteta's got a little bit of that in him, considering that he's kind of school of pep, isn't he? And you think you've seen that already this season, people playing slightly different positions. Like you said, the Havertz thing's a bit mad, isn't he? Looks a little bit square pegs round holes, and I think the Timber thing's a massive blow to them. He was the one I wanted for Liverpool.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think ultimately the fact that they're playing the young centre forward as well, he's been doing great, he's been scoring goals, hasn't he? But I think that'll dry up at some time. So I do feel like there's more question marks over Arsenal than I thought there would be at the start of the season, to be honest with you.
Where are you at Arsenal now?
Kind of similar, although I do understand what Arteta is trying to do. It took me a while to kind of figure it out, but I think you're spot on, Jake, when you say he's worried about people figuring them out. He's also seen kind of how you progress and how you not only become the best team, but how you maintain it. That's the thing he learned from Pep. And you always got the sense from the Man City team that although they kind of knew the game plan, they were always on their toes. They were always being challenged. And I think Arteta's buying into that by saying, look, we can't just sit still because other teams will catch us up. Everyone else is spending money. We need to keep putting new things into the team that make us better. And Declan Rice was one. But genuinely, excuse the pun, I think losing Timber cut them off at the knees in terms of this season's game plan.
Enjoyed that. Very cashier.
Tried to do it low key, but I had
to. So you're reading that auto cue.
Neil loved that joke.
Yeah, the script wasn't all bad. But no, I do genuinely think that there was a little bit of scrabbling around for that. That's because he was so keen on doing that and he trained him to do that. And Thomas Partey had played fullback for Atletico Madrid, so he was in his mind is like, okay, I don't have to scrap everything. We can maybe mix and match it with this. With Kai Havertz, I never really thought like he was plan A. I feel like they brought him in, even though he cost a lot of money, I still think they brought him in as a kind of a guy who can come off the bench or fill a hole. And you've seen that from where he started. He started all over the place already. I think they are still a little bit light defensively, particularly fullbacks. I think that might be their weakness, but they are going to be a problem. They are going to be a good side. I think they're going to do particularly well in the Champions League as well. I do think that that's something.
Got a nice crew.
Yeah, they're going to go into it and they're going to really attack it and believe that they believe that that's their competition. They were in it for a long time in one go, and now they've been gone for a long time. So they're looking to put down roots again. So I think that that's going to be an interesting thing. How that will affect them going into the last stage of the season, we'll have to wait and see. I don't know whether or not their budget allows them to go back in if in January, if maybe they feel like they need an extra one just to go for the push, because they spent nearly 200 million in the summer, and for some clubs that actually matters.
They've got a new song Fuad. It's about North London.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a big debate on Twitter about whether it's any good or not. And I feel like going, you're missing the point, ladies and gentlemen. Let's face it, it's gents. Women have got other things to worry about. But the men arguing over whether it's a good song or not and how it rates up and up. It's mainly West Ham, basically. So how it rates against I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles is a real debate. A surprising debate on Twitter.
Wow.
But I think they're missing the point. Fuad, I think the point is it exists, and the point is the whole grand singing it. And I think when we've been flying and we've been on big adventures, it's always been soundtracked by like big new songs or stuff like that. And the fact that
All Show Me Love.
Yeah, exactly. And so when these things happen, it's sort of suggestive of kind of something to me. And the fact that the whole stadium singing it, the fact that it was written by, you know, the story behind the song and how it sort of emerged, and now it's this big thing. You know, I don't really care how I haven't done an analysis of the lyrics. Do you know what I mean? I'm just like, this is something.
It's a thing. Yeah, no, you're right. I think I've seen some of the debate. I think it's been about how people like change their accent for it, and people get annoyed about that. That seems to be a bit of a thing.
Some people have moaned that it's too new, and I'm like, well, it's got to fucking start somewhere. Do you know what I mean? Like, songs just don't emerge 50 years old. Yeah, where's this song's heritage?
I mean, technically, Arsenal's heritage is in South London, not North London, but that's
I saw that argument as well.
Sorry.
Let's get involved in the debate then. No, I think I completely agree. Mo and I did the top 6 show not too long ago, and we were sort of talking about this a little bit in terms of how they have got a bit of a story to tell themselves, haven't they? And they've started to collect big moments in that stadium as well, which I think is really important under a new manager, new players, you know, all these sorts of things, and build this togetherness that we always talk about. I always think about 16, 17 when we're talking about sides sort of building to something, because, you know, that was the first year where I really felt like, you know, Liverpool had a natural progression, and look, Arsenal are ahead of that. They sort of skipped that bit in a sense, and you know, went straight from not being in the Champions League to challenging for the league last year, which is great, I guess, but it can also have its problems, can't it? Because I feel like there's that pressure to back that up again this season. You know, they won't be thinking just top 4, will they? But they've only been in the Champions League 1 year now, after quite a few years out, and they've had those near misses as well. So I wonder if that does play on the mind. But these big moments that they've had, they've already beaten United in quite a dramatic way. They've had the whole of last season as well, and things like the song, things like that little singing group that they now have at the front of one of the stands, and you know, there seems to be that thing there where, you know, they're almost losing that Arsenal fan TV type vibe about them. Do you know what I mean? That they are becoming this club that has that positive energy on and off the pitch, and that is dangerous. You know, we can talk about how we've utilised it, and how the team and manager weaponized it, if you like. But other people can do it as well, and it's something to be sort of wary about from our point of view. But I still feel on the pitch, you know, that there are enough problems, there are enough things there that I feel like Liverpool are just better than that and can get at them with. So I'm still confident in terms of us being better at doing all that than they are, and the songs.
They had I saw the thing from half-time this morning. Well, I saw it this morning. It was from half-time in one of the home games this season. This big sort of brass band they had sort of playing, and loads of people were watching it. And people were like, oh, would you want this at your club or not? And I was like, fucking, you'd have a job, the lowest centene. If you got them in, if you'd be more room for anyone else, you know what I mean? Like, you know, they've got these big wide concourses.
Be more work for you as well. You don't want to be busy enough on a match day,
Listen, the Liverpool brass band, newly formed. We're going to the national championships at the weekend, by the way.
Amazing.
The Liverpool brass band, straight in there, national, you know, qualified from the Northwest. Not the only people in Europe, tell you. But anyway, we'll look out for the Liverpool brass band on Sunday. We'll make a mark in
Anfield
in some ways. Yeah. If anyone wants to book us, weddings and wakes. Do our business, though, aren't they, Arsenal? Very much. Yeah.
Good side.
Yeah. Thumbs up. 4 out of 5 our business rating. So I want to talk about West Ham. I mean, they've done. I think they feel a bit better without Rice, which is quite a fun thing. But does anyone want to talk about West Ham, or should we move on?
Just to say the same as what was said about Spurs, I think that they've got a very good first 11. I still think it's mad that essentially Mikel Antonio is their striker.
Yeah, I think he thinks it's mad as well. I think he's a bit like, I think really the forward, you know.
Yeah, and like, I think it was really interesting. Someone asked him about Skamaka towards the end of last season, and you would expect him, is his rival for his place, you expect him to be hammering him, and he was like, I feel really sorry for him, actually. You can tell he's like, he's not used to playing centre-forward for David Moyes. He's like, he's a normal, actual good striker.
Yeah.
Like, playing centre-forward for David Moyes is a very different thing. So if they can find someone else to bring into the group to do that, then I think they can sustain. But again, I think they might be dangerous in Europe.
He's signed a lad from Ajax, hasn't he? He looks good.
Midfielder.
Is he midfielder?
Kudus, yeah.
Kudus as well.
Yeah,
He's a wide forward. Yeah, he's not going to run channels.
Yeah, he'll get goals, but and to be fair, Moyes might turn him into a striker. To be fair,
Antonio came in as a right back, didn't he?
He's just all action. He's just all action. Mikel Antonio, he's great. I think they'll go well in Europe. He seems to have got this love affair with it. I've done these sorts of the last few years, and I think they enjoy it. And why not? It's good fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's face it.
And Bowen's also one you can hang your hat on in terms of scoring goals as well. So he's got bits from other parts of the team, and let's see what Paqueta does as well, because he seems better this year.
He's quietly probably one of the most experienced managers in the Europa League, UEFA Cup as well. So I think that was one thing that when I missed last season with their run, he's probably done more games than as many. He's definitely top 2, top 3 than any other manager. So yeah, Moisey will never die.
I think it's a ginger thing.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, ginger, Anglo-Celtic thing.
Stick together.
Definitely.
You
big lads. Big lads.
Maybe it's that. I think Joe Bowen's coming to Liverpool next season, by the way. I'm prepared to show my notes at a later stage. We haven't got time for it today, but just have a little look at
Danny Dyer will love the Met Quarter.
I'm just saying, just have a look at who his agent is. Just have a little look. Okay. A little look, everyone listening, at his agency and the other people that they've got on the books. And wonder, where's Shadow Bowen there? But anyway, I'll leave it with you. Man United, fuck it out. There's a
shit kit.
Yes.
I don't mind the jacket of the away kit. They should just play in that.
Don't mind it.
No, the jacket.
The jacket.
Do you know what I mean? When they come out, they look good, and then they take it off, and the actual kit.
United stripes is weird.
It's awful.
Don't like it.
They've got a weird
pure
thing
mank.
with blue as well. They wear blue more than you think, like in the history,
Weirdos.
which is strange. Won't catch us doing that. I like that they're now having a fight with the fans, the dedicated fans. Did you see that, Mo? There's a thing where basically the people who've been trying the best to get the atmosphere going in that stadium that's fucking falling apart in front of the worst lads on earth on the pitch, and they've even managed to pick a fight with them, which is like, oh, come on.
I mean, in the summer of kind of having to worry about things apart from football, they are having a banner year. Like you say, they're now kind of doing it to themselves, but it just kind of gives off the vibe of a team and an organisation that's still not all working in the same direction, and that direction is not forwards. Like, every time you can look at them bring in a good player and think, okay, well, maybe that will help. There's something else. Like, as a group, we've spoken about Arsenal and their togetherness, even talk about West Ham and their togetherness, and us when we've been good. You don't see it there. Like, even when I think about like goal celebrations, like, do you ever remember seeing goal celebrations where they've all been together, or is it just Rashford in the corner doing his thing? It's mostly that. Like, and that might be a bit glib, but I do think that if you're trying to improve as a team, you need to all believe you're together. And say what you will about Jadon Sancho, like, he might not necessarily have been putting it in training. If you're the manager, you might feel like that you're justified in calling him out that. But the fact of the matter is that it's now created a conflict, and there are going to be people within that dressing room who side with Jadon Sancho, who remember all what he was saying about his mental health issues and feel like maybe that's not the best way to kind of deal with this, boss. So all of that's kind of folding into the stuff that's going out there on the pitch. So then you get into a situation where you go home against Nottingham Forest, a game you should be winning, a game you should be winning easily, and you're 2-0 down in 5 minutes. Yeah. You're thinking, what the fuck's happening here?
Yeah.
And I just don't think that even bringing in someone like Amrabat, who I think is going to be a better player than some of the players they've used in that position, even if they get Højlund into a situation where he's doing regular things, they still don't have that clear. They still don't look like they know what they're all supposed to be doing, and then they all agree with what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think the ownership thing is just massively hanging over them, and I think it's silly because it always turns into an argument over transfer spend, and that's partly Gary Neville's fault because he's just the worst. You know, he's got a good point, but he just makes a shit argument for it, and it's not a spend thing. It's like it's sort of the whole like the fish rots from the head down or the head up from the head, and it is just where I think they're having their issues around the football club isn't to do because they're spending loads, isn't to do with transfers. It's everyone's obsession with transfers and sorts of stuff like that. But there's basically there's obviously been no direction. There's obviously been poor leadership. They've employed badly in terms of, forget about the managers for a second. It's above the managers. It's chief executive level. It's board level. It's a dysfunctional football club, and you're seeing that on the pitch.
100%. I mean, it is a thing of the bad culture and the uncertainty and lack of direction stemming from the top. And what feels like is happening is, they bring in a Ten Hag, for example, and to sort of stop that from filtering down into the players and everything else. And he does at the start, and he comes in with this freshness and new ideas, and you see some of it. But then because it's so sort of powerful and there's so much of it coming from above him, there is no choice but it coming down into the everyday culture of the players, the staff and everything. And the Jadon Sancho thing is really interesting to me. Obviously, there's the personal things and the mental health side that we don't know about and you don't want to sort of speculate about. But, if you just think back to what Jadon Sancho was before he came to Man United and everything that came around him and the sort of player he was, to see what's happened, and you can also now point at other players and other cases, it just stinks, doesn't it? In terms of a club, having systemic problems, it can't just be fixed by one or two personnel. It has to be the people above the manager. And the people making those decisions, appointing those people, are the owners. So if they haven't got the ability or the sort of want, even the desire, then there is big issues there. And investing into the club, starting problems with the fans, we've seen that all before, haven't we? We've seen how that script sort of goes. So I think
you need a flag with a knob on with their version of Perslow. I really felt like that really started the ground ball rolling from a Liverpool point of view. More flags with knobs on for me.
Maybe we you get that over to whoever we know at Man United.
I think I'm buying ours. It's not doing anything. I wonder if it still exists. The Perslow knob flag.
It's a filler.
Text in if you've got it in your garage. He is telling me that he still exists. There's a show for the international break, isn't it? We go on the hunt of the Perslow knob flag. The Sancho thing is funny to me, Jake, because I don't know who's right and who's wrong in this situation, but I did see over the last couple of days that apparently Ten Hag was a bit taken back with the reaction. Like, oh, fucking hell, I wasn't expecting all this. And you're like, come on, mate. You basically just said, you've thrown him under the bus. And you're like, well, I didn't expect him to get run over. Do you know what I mean? It's like, as I say, I don't know who's right or wrong, but this idea of like, oh, I didn't expect, you're like, well, it's sort of going to happen when you do that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I actually quite like about him is he takes no prisoners. I quite like seeing that in this day and age. You don't see much of it anymore, do you? I thought the way they handle
similar to you at Sefton Park Rangers.
Not quite. I'm more of a arm around the shoulder type of guy and buy them a shandy and then fuck them off. But it's I think the way he handled like the Ronaldo situation could be seen as a little bit cold, but I thought quite well. He handled it quite well. But I do kind of agree with what everyone said. It does kind of feel like that the issues are more than him. I do feel like it's quite one of the things that I've seen as quite strange though. I think I'm right in saying is when he was at Ajax, he's very much seen as a head coach and did a lot of the coaching. I don't think he was doing the signings, but it feels like this summer he's kind of took a bit of a lead with the signings. I think it's quite interesting. Obviously, big budgets and the strategy kind of looks a little bit all over the place as normal, doesn't it? I think Onana's come into a lot of stick. I do feel like he will be good over the 5 years or whatever he ends up playing for them. But it is a little bit all over the place, and he's still. When you think that you've seen a summer where Harry Kane's moved, who's kind of guaranteed 30-35 goals for similar sort of money as the other lad that they brought in, who scored about 18 goals in Serie A. I found that very strange. And it does I still don't know what formation they play, I still don't really know what they do, and there is a lot of sort of unhappy people there, isn't there? So, but yeah, none of our business. Fuck them, they're in Europa League.
See, this is one thing I would say. Everything I've all said is true. I do still think they are our business, though.
Okay.
And this is
that is the topic of the show.
Yeah.
Bringing it back, Mo, thanks.
And this is because they do still have quality players.
Striker looks quite...
He started off shit last season as well, didn't he? Right in saying that?
Well, yeah. They got beat 4-0 until
maybe
we rolled
you're right.
into town.
Oh, yeah. Basically, we sorted that out.
We were their fluffers last season, but that's not going to happen this time. But I do...
Only for about 6 months, though.
It was enough, trust me. Yeah. They have still got enough good players. As we saw against Nottingham Forest, they do still have a bit of that aura at Old Trafford where they can kind of turn it around. So I still expect them to be in and around the mix of the things that we want. But I do think that we're better, and I do think if the push comes to shove, it's between us and them. I'm still picking us.
Is right. Okay, we'll have another little break now. When we come back, we're going to talk about Chelsea and Newcastle and finish a little bit on the Reds, of course. But before all that, I just wanted to play you a little clip from the Bacon Butty Show, which we do every Monday morning without fail, and didn't miss it today. So here is a little clip of me and Andy talking about these stories around Jurgen Klopp going to Germany and why it's a load of nonsense. As soon as the Germany manager job comes up, he's going to get linked. You worried at all? Do you ever worried? You worried now?
I can't see it. I mean, I've been surprised in the past, I'll be honest. But no, I can't see it. Loads of reasons. I mean, before we get into the Liverpool bit, I think international football to do his head in. He seems like the fella who wants to be on the training ground every day. Like, not micromanaging, but just living and breathing it every day and being in control of everything. Whereas, obviously, if you're an international manager, you can only work with what you're given. You can't go and tell, I don't know, the Dortmund manager how you want to train the players, how to set up tactically, or you can't get on the phone to Bayern Munich and go, hey lad, listen, we want to do this. And it's whether, I often think Jurgen's damned with faint praise when, you know, the people talk about him being full on and all that, and I think it underappreciates actually that tactically he's actually sound. Like, he knows what he's doing.
When we're at our best, we're so well drilled.
Oh, yeah.
That comes from the training
But
ground.
that's repetition. Can you do that in them short windows with international squads? Do you know what I mean? I honestly don't think you can. So that's from the actual footballing side. From the other side of it, he just seems reinvigorated at the minute. Like this whole Liverpool, I'm glad it's become a marketing thing, and Verge actually mentioned it, this Liverpool version 2 thing. You know, and it doesn't strike me as someone who'd walk out mid-project. Had it been 12 months ago, before he signed his new contract, I'd go, all right, hang on, this might be a problem here.
Yeah.
But like, he's come out, you mentioned it before, he looks happy, he looks reinvigorated, he looks like he's into something. And you can see where you can see this new Liverpool. I mean, Jordan Henderson, one of the bits he did say in his interview, which he hasn't been absolutely slaughtered for, is that he spoke to the manager and he's saying, you know, Jurgen's dead happy with his signings, and you can see why. So I'm not worried in the slightest. I mean, I don't know what you think, but like, I think the rebuild is everything. And look, as great as the Liverpool side were, and he built the greatest Liverpool side I've seen in my lifetime.
Yes,
Liverpool we want, he did, without doubt. But you say, I know change is good as rest, it's a bit of a cliche, but you wonder with these players, if you've been there 6-7 years, especially in the midfield, so if you're a forward, you score goals, you're happy, aren't you? Whereas if you're in that midfield and you're hearing the same message every day, do you go deaf to it? Do you go a little bit deaf? Whereas you bring in fresh blood, and then, you know, you can start again. Start from day one, and it's a new experience, not just for the players, but for the manager himself.
Okay, welcome back to the room. I've still got Mo, we've still got Jake, and I've still got Fuad. If you enjoyed that little clip and you want more, make sure you're downloading the Anfield Wrap app, or you can sign up on Patreon now as well. Or if you just want the video stuff, and that is a subscriber video, and you're watching on YouTube, you can join on YouTube as well. I think I got all the words right. It's confusing, isn't it? It's tough. Join, subscribe, just get involved.
Patreon one, is that a new one?
It is, mate. Yeah. All the cool kids are on Patreon, aren't they? So we thought we'd give it a go. We've got all the best shows on there. You can search a little bit better.
OnlyFans next.
I mean,
that'll be when times are tough. you know the rap's struggling. If I'm pimping Fuad. but there we are. Hopefully it doesn't come to that.
Yeah, hopefully not. Fucking hell.
To be fair, I think you do well. That's
I think it's more the awkward calls following his mum that he's not looking forward to.
I'm not sure what my niche is, to be honest. I'm not sure what I'm feeling to.
I've seen your feet.
I mean, let's move on from Fuad. Chelsea still mad, Fu.
Yeah, they are. They're absolutely insane. And I've just read before that Lavia's out possibly till after the October international break as well. So that's another one of their new lads who they're just never going to see probably for a while.
They decided he's not fit enough anyway, didn't they? So they were just sort of like building him up, and then they broke him.
They have broken him, and the thing is, I've really struggled with them because I've watched them a fair bit, especially the first couple of games. Obviously, we play them, but even after that, and you can see things like there's little bits of everyone that sort of they've signed and every sort of player you haven't heard of who's playing for them that you sort of go, oh, okay, yeah, he's got a bit of something about him. I think that the striker Jackson is good. He's going to come good at some point. It's just the balance of expectation now versus long-term expectation and long-term sort of targets. And I think that's where the trouble starts to build, because I feel like it's easy for a manager to say, we're in a process, we're at the start of a process, we've got all these new things, you lot have all come in and we're going to build towards this. But if they aren't seeing enough signs early on, if there's not enough things to buy into, if there's not enough moments in that stadium where they're able to share with the fans and have those moments like Arsenal have had over the last couple of years, then it does become tough. And I think they are our business, to bring it back to the topic of the show, purely because they could just be streaky. They could go on a bit of a run where suddenly they do really feel like our business, and then lose a couple or three back to back against someone you don't expect. And I think that's where it becomes a bit tricky. It's sort of not a title challenge as such, but a disruptor almost. And I feel like that's where I could see them sort of harming us or interfering with us.
You're nodding, Mo.
Yeah, that's kind of that whole disruptor element. That's kind of where I'm at with it as well. It's like you can't really trust them enough to make a sustained challenge, but you can trust them to be good enough to do to go up against any team on their day. It's going to be interesting to see how much patience Chelsea have with the situation, because I do think we forget Graham Potter kind of started well.
Yeah, he did, didn't he? Yeah.
And then they lost to Brighton, and then it was all like, oh, well, if you lost to them, then surely we're not that good. And then I think psychology plays a big part in Chelsea, not just in terms of the way they are as the dressing room, the decision makers, the fan base. They all seem to have a hair trigger. And again, it's really hard to develop and to build in that environment. If you were to say to me that Chelsea and their fans were going into the same season with their same expectations as Spurs in terms of what they can achieve, then I'll say, okay, that sounds fair enough. They might have more quality players in there, but you've got the upheaval factor which you have to put in. And then you'd say, okay, that feels normal. Chelsea aren't going to have that. No. Chelsea are going to believe that Chelsea have to get in the top four. They spend all this fucking money. If they don't get into the Champions League, then
they'll just spend it again.
Well, yeah. So next summer is going to be even more mad, basically. So all the players they've bought, they're going to start selling them. So again, in that scenario, it's hard to say any kind of real development. But they will always be dangerous. I do think that they've got, again, it's one of those where you look at that squad and you think, okay, if you could just guarantee that these 7 or 8 players are going to be available every week, then this is a very good football team. But you can't do that in football, and you can't really guarantee that there's not going to be upheaval amongst those players themselves. So it's just a really hard team to predict. The hardest team to predict, I think, because they should be good, but then it's Chelsea.
Do you think they'll get it together at some point, Jake? Is that your feeling, or do you think actually, it might just not happen for them this season at least?
First things first, priorities. Yeah, shit kit. It's had a lot of praise.
Why have you got a blue away kit?
Yeah, I don't.
That's the maddest thing. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. That's
symbiotic of what's going on there, and it's strategically, I think. But to go back to your question, John, I think he's too much of a good manager not to get it good. I do feel like he was an excellent appointment, and I would put him up there with your Klopps, your Guardiolas, and I think Pochettino is an excellent coach. I just think it's a mad situation. I think what we'll probably see is the benefits of the fruit of Pochettino's labour next season, probably, once he kind of gets it right and decides which squad of 25 he actually wants. But I think this season we might see them blow hot and cold, and I think we've probably already seen that. I was actually really impressed with them against us, but then they kind of fell off a cliff ever since, haven't they? But yeah, I think we'll see a lot of that. But I'm right in saying no Europe, aren't they? Because I think that'll help them massively.
It will, to an extent. I do think once you get into a situation where you've got time to build and you've got time to game plan and you can kind of spend more time with the players, convince them of the plan, so then everyone buys in, that's great. But less games, big squad, means potentially a lot of unhappy players sitting around kicking their heels, not playing. Yeah. That might be the problem. And to be fair, that was kind of the problem he had to deal with at PSG as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on. I've just realised we've not done Man City yet. So we need slightly more time. I went past them and then forgot to sort of circle back. But with Newcastle, I'll start with you, Fuad. They on this Opta analysis thing, it says they got the toughest start of the first 5 fixtures. If you then go on to the first 10, it's still the 4th hardest, which suggests it is a tough start, but it gets slightly better. A bit like inflation in the UK. Do you know what I mean? Not as bad as it was. Everything's still going up. Yeah, exactly. God, that was topical, wasn't it? Get me on politics. It's a tough start, and you have to bear in mind. What I would say though is, I think Europe starts now, and that's going to be sort of a distraction for them, and they're all dead into it, and they're singing all the songs, and that's great. But they didn't have Europe last season, and so although I think everything does equal itself out eventually in terms of who you play and stuff like that, I think when can be key, and I think they'd have liked a nicer start, because I think Europe is going to be sort of a big thing for them, really. And so I think that if they could have chose the fixtures to fall in a slightly different way, I think they would have for that reason.
Definitely, and it's no easy Champions League group as well. Their one, right? It's Milan.
Yeah, they're not gonna, they might go through. I think they might go through, but they're not going to be able to rest anyone.
And like immediately, I think of their start, and you're playing against big sides already, like they have, and you haven't won against them, and then you're going up against other big sides in Europe this time in a new competition, all these new things. It's a squad and a team and a manager who don't have that experience either. I think Tonali is probably the one who's played in Europe the most out of any of them in terms of latter stages of competitions and things, and that does count for something, doesn't it? I feel like we've already seen a bit of Eddie Howe, not insecurity, I think that's a bit too far, but just sort of questioning things a little bit here and there with how they've started the season and the decisions he's made in game, especially against us, I think. And I think that all feeds into it. That all sort of feeds into this idea of not just being inexperienced, but they've come from a way of playing like they did last season, where they were really solid and really built from the back, didn't they, in a lot of ways. And now they're going to have to be a bit more expansive. They're going to have to sort of back themselves a little bit more. And I do think they do have a weakness in that area of the pitch, in the sort of central defenders and in defensively, where they don't really have that confidence in each other necessarily to play in that way. And I think that's probably going to be a bit of a problem for them. The tough start, look, they can tell themselves the story about the tough start, and that will be helpful. But it's a really, really big period for them when it does ease up to win those games, because I think if they don't and they are inconsistent, they are none of our business.
When I look at Newcastle, Jake, I think of last season where it felt like everything sort of went for them, and that's not to take anything away from them, because I think on the pitch, they did a really good job, and I think the manager, if you look at it from a coaching point of view, how he managed to gel together the new players with the old, and some that Steve Bruce didn't even fancy. I think they do deserve credit for what happened last season, but I also think they got a bit of luck, and they got a decent tailwind, and things went. They got a bit of momentum, like we were talking about with Spurs before, and they were able to ride that wave because of that sort of football club. I feel like this season we're already seeing the other side when things don't quite go for you, and how they want, and how listen, it's not going to fall apart there. I don't think they're going to finish bottom half or anything like that. But how it is fine margins often football, and a couple of balls that they were getting a nice bounce of last season, it isn't quite happening for them this season, both on the pitch, both literally and metaphorically, the bounce of the ball.
No, exactly. I think there's the two major things at play is one, how do they as a team deal with being a sort of big team with the emphasis on them to go and win the game, and then the second thing is how does the manager go and do it. There's a difference between how the manager wants them to do and what the players want to go and do ultimately, because he can only be saying what he wants to say. They've got to go and deliver it, and I think we saw that perfectly against us. When kind of going down to 10 men, the emphasis was on them a bit more. It was almost them fighting to prove that they're at our level, they're better than us or whatever, and he kind of flapped it a little bit, didn't he? And I think that's the really interesting thing. I think there's clear sort of parallels between the start of City and where they are now. It reminds me a little bit when Mark Hughes was doing decent at the start, and then they just quite quickly lost patience with him and thought, fuck him, and went and got Mancini in. And I think probably something similar is going to happen. It looks like they're a little bit more well connected there at Newcastle, but it wouldn't surprise me if he lost his job this season genuinely, and they just brought somebody in with a bigger caliber, because it is a different job being a big club, being a big team. It is kind of different sort of mentality that it brings, and going into the Champions League and all that, don't think that, Eddie Howe starting from scratch there, and I do rate him, and I do think what the job that they're doing there is good. I don't like his little idiot mate who sits next to him, but I think ultimately he's bit off a lot more than he can chew. It was almost like he's progressed too much, I think, last season.
Yeah.
That can happen sometimes. You can get it. You can get ahead of yourselves, and then optimism changes, expectation changes, and then suddenly you're trying to temper it, which I don't really feel like suits them as a club.
It doesn't, and I think you're right in terms of expectations. This was kind of what the whole theme of the show really is, isn't it? What are our expectations for these things? Expectations are fine as long as you aren't really going to pieces if those expectations aren't met. Like I like to have ambitions, because ambitions feel a little bit more like, okay, you can live with the consequences, you can move forward. And what Fuad was saying before about Arsenal and their incremental kind of progress compared to what we were doing when we were Liverpool, I think very much applies again for Newcastle. Like, you can do too much too soon, because you need to then be settled at this highest level. And if you haven't had enough bumps through the road, because that's the thing, isn't it? Like, when you look at our Champions League, like, we got to the final, it's like, yeah, it's great, it's got to the final. But we weren't really kind of good enough to get over the line. And then you go to the next season and you do a little bit better, you do a little better, you do better, rather than thinking, okay, well, this is us now, we're always going to get to the final. That wasn't really how we were thinking. And it reminds me of, like, there's this high jumper, Mondo Duplantis, and people have been criticising him for breaking the world record 1 centimetre at a time. And it's like, for starters, they give him 100 grand every time he breaks the world record. I do it one at a time. But it means that he gets more comfortable at that new height. He's got more reps. He's jumping he's jumping 621 loads until he gets to 622. Then he's jumping 622 loads until he gets to 623. You're giving yourself the reps and the bumps. And I look at that Champions League group, like, I'm not being funny about it. They might lose all of those games. Like, AC Milan are the 3rd seed. They were in the semi-finals last year. And yeah, they haven't started well in Serie A, but they know that they can do it in Europe. Borussia Dortmund should have won the league last year. They're going to be burning. They're going to be a very good team. And I've watched PSG a couple of times, and they look good. So there's an argument where you can say Newcastle will get a good result in one of those games, and they'll give them a boom for the season, and they'll suddenly start to believe in themselves. They finish bottom with 0 points. Then, yeah, Eddie Howe might be looking at somewhere else very quickly, and it suddenly looks all very different around there. They are still good players. I do still think that they're good enough to be in the mix, but they also could be in a very, very bad position, maybe about January time.
Did anyone see Amanda Staveley at the Great No Fun at the weekend? No. She said, I quote, "The Great No Fun was one of the fantastic reasons why we came to Newcastle." Sorry, I couldn't give a straight face there, but what a weird line. Like, she's gone and she's like, "Oh, I need to say something really good about it. I don't know what the fuck to say here." And
amazing.
Then, what a weird line.
Just talk, yeah.
She's very meta, isn't she?
Yeah.
I find it all very odd. Like, I've been watching a couple of them Amazon series as well. It's peak, like, yeah, third universe stuff. You know what I mean? I just don't really understand what's going on there. And I think I find it really, really odd, to be serious for a second, that their identity is very much like working class town, and then now it's very sort of entitled royalist mentality almost. I feel
they bought into the dream because they had nothing for so long.
Yeah.
They basically rolled the dice and thought, why not? And that's all well and good and might help them at this point. But like I say, if they end up getting embarrassed, then that could all turn.
Okay, very quickly on to Man City then, and we'd like them to be our business this season, Jake, because, you know, we can pick about the squad and say it's surprisingly thin and stuff like that, and you can say, well, how are they going to cope without Gundogan being the best player in the world come May and things like that? But they're all things, as a Liverpool fan, you hope to be caring about. Like, if I'm in April going like, oh, I wonder how they're going to fare without Gundogan, then someone's gone right from a Liverpool point of view rather than wrong from a City point of view, because, you know, we talked before about unknowns and potential wild cards, and Chelsea being the hardest one to predict. They're almost the easiest one to predict, aren't they, unfortunately, because they've got the track record they have.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Best team in the world, you know, probably the best version of City that there's ever been, you know, a matter of months ago, and that's a scary proposition, isn't it? With at this point, you know, arguably the best coach in the world. The only thing, and I'm not being negative here, I'm saying this, but I'm thinking these are things for us to genuinely be able to latch on to, is the human nature element of they did win everything last season. You know, will there be a bit of a dip? Does the squad looks arguably not as good. You know, there's talk now of Guardiola going to England, isn't there? I've seen a little bit of that. So hopefully
he
more
might
of
just
that.
do it as well.
I thought
he's not got hobbies, has
well,
he?
He might just fancy doing something new, mightn't he? Do you know what I mean? So all of these things, I think hopefully we can latch onto, and we do see a dip. But yeah, shit kit as well.
Nice start for them, third easiest according to Opta. They then go to around mid-table, so suggest they've got tougher fixtures, coming up. West Ham away next time, I think is a really interesting one. We sort of skimmed past West Ham before. It'll be a really good marker of where both teams are at this season. I think the West Ham Man City game at the weekend.
I agree. I think that West Ham will go into it thinking that for the first time they can actually trouble City, that they can affect the City game plan. Obviously, Lucas Paquetá City tried to buy him. Yeah. He's going to want to go and put on a show.
We hit that one, wasn't it?
Well, not really.
What's interesting about both? What's interesting about both Paqueta and Nunes, who they end up with, is they were both really heavily scouted by Liverpool.
Yep.
Yeah,
so we're obviously looking for similar sorts of profile in terms of midfielders, and you wouldn't think it because we play sort of in a different way. But they were both. Liverpool had a good long look at both of them, and obviously City the same.
Yeah, Paquetá, even when he was back in Lyon, looked like he could play at a higher level, and so I'm not surprised that he's come into their radar, and I think he'd be much better for them than he's even shown so far for West Ham. For City, believe it or not, this is actually the first time they've won 4 out of 4 since the first season of Guardiola, which was mad when I found that out, because you think that they're imperious, but they always. I mean, they normally lose to Spurs at some point in the first 4 games of the season. So yeah, they're feeling even better, and they are the Death Star. They are just going to be roaming interview. I kind of compare them to Djokovic. It's just like no one really enjoys him winning, but you got to be like, okay, fair play. He's the best, so he won. And I feel that way about City, and I still feel like they are the best. I still feel like they've been able to. The players who they've brought in have kind of quite nicely matched up for the players who've gone. And you mentioned Gundogan. They basically brought 2 players to cover him. So that kind of tells you how good and influential he was. I think that their wrinkles or potential for downfall is only really if they take their eye off the ball. And again, I'm not really 100% sure they're going to do that. Like, I'm trying to put some hell into it.
Helps with that because he's almost brand new, isn't he? So I think, if some of the players who've been there a long time, and I think City have, you looked at they've been leaving in dribs and drabs, haven't they? So it's another summer we mentioned Gundogan going, the Sterling moves on the summer before. There's probably 2 or 3 others. So that it's not a big change in one summer. It's over time, isn't it? And so, you'd like to think, maybe they'll sort of get a bit of complacent. But someone like Haaland, who's gone from winning nothing at Haaland to suddenly winning everything, he's not going to go, well, that's not for me.
No, and we need to remember for Haaland as well, Norway are still shit.
Yeah.
Norway have got him and Martin Odegaard, and they're still shit.
He's really sound. He's really sound for Norway. Have you watched him? Like, he's like, oh, unlucky lads. When another cross goes miles over his head, and it's like, you can tell he's just
Next
like,
one.
He's like, come on, boys. If I was that good, I'd be like, but he's probably thinking, just go back to Kev De Bruyne.
But the thing is, though, I think there's a group of them that have only grown up together as well. Because I saw an interview with him and Odegaard, and they were kind of ripping on Haaland a bit because, like, when he was younger, he used to be a bit like that. But it's like they've known each other so long. It's like, man, just fuck off.
I think the thing with him as well with Haaland is City's not he's not staying at City forever, is he? So he has that individual thing which will drive them all on of scoring fuckloads of goals, chasing records, whatever it is. And that being a bit of a drive to push everyone else on.
Yeah, and the worst thing about all of this is the fact that even in what some people would call a good scenario, I don't like calling it that, but if Haaland were injured, and he did get injured periodically for Dortmund, they've got Alvarez.
I know. He's brilliant.
He's
so good.
He is so, genuinely...
Too good. I watched the World Cup just going, fuck's sake.
If Haaland got out, if you told me Haaland's going to get injured for 6 months, I'd tell you Julian Alvarez is going to score 25 league goals.
They played together a few times this season, haven't they, as well?
Yeah.
Which is scary as well.
Sorry.
I do find that funny, the way that, Pep's tactical genius has been talked about, and how he kind of likes to keep people thinking and all that. He's basically just gone to big man and small man now, hasn't he? Yeah. But fair play to it.
When it works, it works.
Yeah. I like that the bench is now like 5 world-class players and then some lads. Like, I had a little look. They had someone called Oscar Bob, who I'm not having to be.
He's like footy manager when you play for like 15 years.
Double B, Oscar Bob. It was either Oscar Bob or Bob Oscar. I'm not sure, but Oscar Bob on the bench. And We had 2 goalies on the bench last time as well. Fucking no players.
Just a blank avatar in the background.
Honestly, yeah. Oscar, fair play. When Oscar Bob goes to Chelsea for 40 million next summer, like, I'm going to end up looking stupid. But, like, yeah, Oscar Bob, I googled him, apparently he's real, but I've got no definitive proof. Okay, I'll finish up with a question then. If I could offer you one team to lose this weekend, who would you pick?
Everton.
Well, they're playing Arsenal, which is interesting. I love Everton Arsenal. It's one of my favourite fixtures this season. They were one of the only teams to beat them last year. They beat them when no one was beating them. Not at the end when they had the little wobble. So Everton Arsenal's a belter.
Yeah,
would you go for Everton seriously?
I mean, it's fun, innit? But it's almost getting a bit arse now.
But also, it's not going to help us win the league, Jake, or finish top 4, or whatever it is our aims are, which is the whole point of the show.
It would still be Evans.
That's fine. Channel you in a Kevin Walsh.
You got to stay true to yourself, mate. I'm kind of tossing between Arsenal and Manchester United. And again, Manchester United is the more realistic, pessimistic. Arsenal, the more optimistic. And seeing as the tone of the show, I think I'm going to go Arsenal.
Okay, if I've got to do one team to lose this weekend, Fuad.
I mean, the answer is Everton, but I'm going for Man City.
You're shooting straight for the top.
I'm shooting for that. They're going to get angry and then win their next 20, so that's the one little worry with that.
It's the Bunnymen in the arena on Saturday as well, so if the Blues get beat there, it's a bit more of a laugh, isn't it?
Interesting. Okay. Hope you've enjoyed that. I'm sure it'll be Neil back next week. But in the meantime, thanks a lot to Andy for producing, for Ash doing the live video, to Fuad, to Mo, and to Jake. I've been John Gibbons. Hope you've enjoyed that. Up the Reds.